Welcome back, fans. We are live once again on the Cheap Heat Productions Pro Wrestling Podcast Network. My name is Jack Kilby at No Gimmicks Guy on the socials. And I'm really excited today to have on a man, perhaps best known for his work in the WWF and Universal Wrestling Federation, Herb Abrams' version. But man, he has really made a name for himself and a mark in the pro wrestling business across a number of territories that we'll talk about, and everywhere in between. He is known as Sunny Beach, Mr. Rick Allen. Rick, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jack. It's a pleasure.
I guess it would be appropriate with the big news of the week, actually the big news of any week, and that's the passing of the immortal Hulk Hogan, whom I know you worked with as part of the movie No Holds Barred, and actually, had the opportunity to hang out with. I'll just put up a couple of the pictures. There's you and Hogan, and then it looks like some training going on there, and a more recent picture of you and the Hulkster. Can you tell the fans a bit about your relationship with Hogan and your thoughts on his tragic passing?
Yeah, I met Terry back in Tampa, Florida, down in 1984, 85, when I was breaking into the business down there with Championship Wrestling from Florida in Tampa. And got to hang out a couple bars with him, had some drinks and stuff, went to dinner, and he was an all-around nice guy. If you were a Florida guy, he liked you a lot. He was, grew up in Tampa, Clearwater, St. Petersburg area. And, we just hit it off good, and that's where, I kind of thought of the name Sandy Beach, being from Jacksonville, Florida. When I first broke into the business, I've started out as Rick Allen, my real name. And then, everybody had a gimmick name in the business. So I grew up right by the beaches in Jack's Beach. And so I said, let me call myself Sandy Beach. So it kind of worked out pretty good for me. But I never knew, when first time I met Hulkster that, I'd be doing a movie with him, No Holds Barred, or, even working alongside of him with the WWF. I was just a young green kid trying to break into the business down in Tampa. So.
What was your experience like? First of all, how did you get cast in No Holds Barred, and what were your thoughts on that, working on that movie? Because it really had a lot of hype and very, very high expectations.
Well, I was working in Atlanta for Jerry Blackwell for Southern Championship Wrestling at the time I got cast, and Joe Pedicino and Gordon Soley had a weekly TV show down there, and they were helping cast some of the, extras and stuff like that for the movie. And they thought that I had a good look, and nobody like in New York ever saw me before and stuff. And I was pretty built up. I was about 6'4" and about 280 pounds at the time when I got cast. And they've been looking at me, WWF, for a little bit, unbeknownst to me, to, sign up with them. And they cast me for the short headbanger role, myself and Joe the Duke. Joe was the small, short headbanger, and or he was the tall headbanger. I was a short headbanger, but I was about 6 or 7 inches taller than Joe at the time. So, but Joe's was a veteran, and lumberjack type, and we just worked well together, in the no count bar, in the fight scene, the first fight scene in No Holds Barred, in the octagon ring. So that's how I got cast. They just were looking for some new talent, some fresh faces, I guess, and myself. And I got my good friend Ray Lloyd Glacier in the movie as an extra. And myself, Stan Hansen, Ray Lloyd, Tiny Lister, he played Zeus, and Hogan. We'd go to Gold's Gym together, work out. Some days on set, we'd have lunches together. We'd work long days. We were there at 5:30 in the morning till, 5:30, 6, 7 o'clock at night, filming and stuff. And we only did our scene within a week. So I was only there for about a week to 10 days in Atlanta, Georgia, where we filmed our parts of the movie. But it was a great launching pad, and it just jump-started my career after Southern Championship. They signed me right away to WWF afterwards, and I hit the road like a week after the movie, after I finished my scene. So I was full-time with the WWF from like June 88 to about almost 1990, 91, around that area. I would work a lot of house shows and, TV tapings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. We'll definitely talk about your tenures in the WWF, but to rewind the tape a little bit, a lot of the fans are interested in how one initially gets into the business, and one of the ways that we see is, most people were fans. Were you a fan growing up yourself, and did you ever have a singular moment where you said, you know what, I want to do this for a career?
From sixth grade on, I knew I wanted to be a pro wrestler. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, and they had the Jacksonville Coliseum there. And I was blessed to know one of my I went to high school, with her name was Lisa Curtis, Don Curtis's daughter, Don and Dottie Curtis's daughter. So I knew Lisa all growing up throughout high school and everything. And I would tell her, I want your dad to get me into wrestling, blah, blah, blah. And I was a huge Dusty Rhodes, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, Mike Graham, Steve Kern. I was huge on them, Harley Race. I just loved, those guys, growing up in Florida, and I got to see him, Barry Windham. So, I would go down every Thursday night at Jacksonville Coliseum, watch the matches, throughout high school. And then Don Curtis said, go to college. He gave me some good words of wisdom. He said, go to college, after you get your degree. He goes, you could always go into wrestling. He goes, it'll still be there for you if you want to go into it. He goes, but get a good education, and, if you still want to do it after college, I'll help you out. So I went to college for about a year and a half. I was studying criminal justice in Jacksonville, Florida. I was going to be a policeman down there in Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And I told him, college wasn't for me. I'd really like to get into pro wrestling. So I started working out and, going to the gym 7 days a week. And, I got my body in good shape. And he liked what he saw, and he sent me down to Tampa to train down there in Tampa. And I trained a little bit with the, independent guys, the outlaw promotions, as they called it back then, around Jacksonville, Florida. And I started having little matches. Like I would go up to Valdosta, Georgia, and I worked some TV up there for a guy named Grady Odom. And then the guy Ben Masters, Peach State Wrestling and stuff. And started making a little name in the Georgia circuit and working around Jacksonville, Florida, and some smaller shows like in Plant City, Florida. I would wrestle wherever they would, hire me, wherever I could get booked, or I'd bring my bag and if somebody would get hurt, or I was bigger than most of the guys that were working. So they would put me on a lot of these cards, but I was still real green though. I was just trying to get experience.
We hear a lot about the old school training methods. I in my research discovered that you were trained out of the famous Gleason's gym.
Well, that's story. That's not the true story. I trained down at Gleason's gym when I moved to New York after I was already wrestling with the WWF. But I would train with Johnny Rods and all his guys over there. And there was another guy named Bobby Bold Eagle, and I trained with him, and I helped him train his guys over there. So I trained a lot over there, but I trained down in Jacksonville, Florida with a guy named Mike Prather. He went as Mike Thor. He was enhanced talent down there with WCW, and he wrestled a lot in the independence things. He used to go as Super Destroyer sometimes in the independent scene. And Larry Hamilton had a little school down there. He was training a lot of guys down there. Larry wrestled for Continental Wrestling, Florida Championship. He went to Charlotte. So Larry was around a lot, and I got to work with a lot of these guys down there.
Sorry, go ahead.
Those were the guys that broke me into business. And I used to have to, pay my dues, set up the rings, tear down the rings, drive the guys, fill up the coolers full of beer for after the show or, during the show. So, I got lucky because I got into the golden era wrestling kind of. Where you paid your dues and you carried a veteran's bag, or, you always shook everybody's hand when you came in the locker room and said hello to everybody. Nowadays, I think that's a lost art or a lost, tradition in the wrestling business.
Speaking of lost traditions, your training process itself, did you find it, a lot of historians talk about how it was very physically taxing and demanding to prepare guys and gals for how demanding the pro wrestling profession is. Did you have that experience of testing your limits?
I actually was all city and all state in amateur wrestling down in Jacksonville, Florida at Terry Parker High School. So I got, the best of both worlds because I had the amateur background and I could shoot. So, nobody would really take advantage of me too much in the ring. Plus I was big and I was strong. So, like you hear horror stories about the dungeon up in Calgary, with Stu Hart, them breaking guys in, or Bob Roop and the guys down in Tampa, stretching guys and breaking their arms, or, like they did Hogan, they tried to break his leg and everything else. And they were just testing you to see how bad you wanted it most of the time, and see how much pain and abuse you could take, because wrestling business isn't for everybody. If you're weak at heart, or if you're a little soft, you're going to get taken advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Leo is asking, we talked about the Hulkster earlier, but what effect do you think the Hulkster's death will have on WWE, and why?
Well, they call him the immortal Hulk Hogan, and he was for a reason, because this man, back when I was wrestling with him back in, 88, 89, 90, this guy, he was never home. I mean, he was always out on the road promoting charity events. He had a lot of Make-A-Wish events. He would be at all kinds of different children's hospitals, and people don't see a lot of that stuff. People talk about it, but this guy was the real deal. I mean, this guy, he was out there promoting the business, and he was the one driving the machine back then, as they say. He was at the wheel, and the whole wrestling federation benefited because of Hulk Hogan. And myself and all the other young kids coming up benefited from Hulk Hogan, because you had that hero, that like superhero, you could look up to and say, hey, I want to be like Hulk Hogan, or hey, I want to be like Harley Race, or Ric Flair, or whoever was champion at the time, Jack Briscoe, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk. There were so many guys growing up that I idolized and watched, and I would try to emulate and stuff like that, and take a little bit from this guy, a little bit from that guy, and try to make it my own. That's what they told me to do, and that's what I tried to do. So, I mean, I got to, live the dream. I mean, I know in high school, they asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? Guidance counselor would ask you, and I said, I either want to be a policeman or a professional wrestler. And I got to kind of do both. I mean, I went to the police academy in Jacksonville, Florida, and when No Holds Barred came around, I was just finished the police academy, and I was going to go into the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And I chose, McMahon told me, he goes, I at least want you here for 2 years. So if you work for me for 2 years, you could still go back and be a policeman if wrestling doesn't work out for you. And I said, you're right. I'd rather, try that out. But starting pay as a police department back in Jacksonville, Florida, back in 1988 was, I think, $29,000 or $30,000 starting pay.
Mm.
You got to work off-duty employment in a uniform, and it would give you a police car to take home with you, your own police car. But I made over $150,000 my first year wrestling with the WWF. So it was well worth it. And I never went back into law enforcement or anything else. But I did, when I got out of wrestling, I started my own private security guard company. And I'm still doing that. And I'm licensed in 5 states right now with the American Protection Bureau.
That's awesome.
Giving me a comfortable life for me and my family. So, if it wasn't for wrestling and some of the relationships I made throughout the industry and, travels and stuff like that, I don't think I would be as successful with my security business as I was today.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned when you started with WWF, you were all over the syndicated TVs. You worked Scott Casey, Rockers, Jim Powers, Powers of Pain, on and on. So obviously the company had a great deal of confidence in you. How did you get that hookup for that initial booking?
Well, I think Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin, they were doing the booking at the time, and they got me in. And then JJ Dillon came along, and he helped do a lot of the booking too. He booked me a lot of shows too. But I was on every booking sheet for almost a year and a half straight. I mean, it was nonstop, and I mean, it was like just a blessing, back then we were running 3 shows a night. We were doing a small show, like maybe at a high school or a college or a civic auditorium that would hold like 3,000-4,000 people or less. Then we would have the medium shows, like a Mid-South Coliseum or Jacksonville Coliseum that could hold 12 to 15,000 people. And then we would have the big shows like Rosemont Horizon or Cow Palace or the Sun Dome down in Tampa that could hold, like 40 or 50,000 people. So, I mean, it was like really cool stuff. And, the first time I wrestled at like the Houston Summit to a sellout crowd, or a Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, or even Madison Square Garden when I wrestled there, sellout crowds. It was like, I was in awe, like the first time I wrestled Madison Square Garden, I think it was September 29th of 1988. And I remember it like yesterday. I mean, it was like a great feeling. I said, wow, I finally made it. After all these years, I'm wrestling the Garden. And the Garden was like the pinnacle of the wrestling business. That's where everybody dreamed of wrestling at. And here I am, started out wrestling, at little, National Guard armories and little high school gyms and little civic centers or community centers, in front of 100, 200 people. So now I'm in front of 25,000 people, and, they're all screaming Sandy Beach. And, I'm like, wow, they know who I am.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm. Mr. Wright is asking, did you get any TV taping dark match wins? And I guess that would count on for house shows too.
Well, I had a lot of wins. I mean, I worked against like SD Jones, where they would put me over, or Mike Sharp sometimes, Brady Boone. Wow. I mean, I had
Casey too, correct?
Yeah, I think I worked with Casey a couple of times, and we went back and forth. He put me over, I put him over, and I knew I was like an enhanced talent, but they had me, working like demolition, because I was big like those guys. So, I can handle it, me and Mike Sharp would tag a lot. Me and Boris Zukov would tag. Me and Nikolai would tag against guys a lot. One time, one of the conquistadors got hurt, and I worked a couple of nights against the Rockers, and it's a good spot, with them back when the conquistadors and the Rockers were doing their little program. So, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I got to fill in a lot of cool places and stuff. And, I didn't win a lot with the WWF, but they kept me busy and working. And, it doesn't matter, how many wins you get, is how much money you make, and how much money you pocket. Nikolai told me that too. So Nikolai, he's an old guy, and he was very wise beyond his years. And he would tell me, Sandy Beach, he goes, you got to save your money. He goes, wrestling isn't forever. Save your money. And I said, so I got some great advice from some of the old timers and veterans, that I would hang out with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had a really, really good spot, and with all the knowledge of the business now, a fan can look at what you did and come to the conclusion they really had a lot of faith in you. So that's quite a big deal. The first fan question that I received is asking about a match that you worked with the late great Bruiser Brody in 1988, asking if you have any general memories of tangling with one of the true outlaws of the history of the business.
I had the pleasure of working with Frank about 3 times down in Southern Championship Wrestling for Jerry Blackwell. And the first time I worked TV with him, he just got off the plane. He was like, I guess he was jet lagged, and he didn't probably really want to be there because he just flew in from Japan, right into Atlanta. So I got him, and he just went to work on me, and I didn't know, I knew about Frank, he'd heat up a lot of young guys and stuff. He was very stiff and stuff. So he didn't give me too much to work with. So he just, the big finish was his big boot. And I had a knot on my head. It was like a big, like baseball, for about 4 days after I worked with him. My head swelled up, and I had like a egg on it, and black and blue. And I was just like happy to get out of there alive. It was about a 4-minute match, but that time he definitely got the best of me, and he scared the crap out of me. I said, "Did I do something wrong?" He goes, "No, that's just how he works." I was asking a couple guys in the back, like Tommy Rich or Doug Summers, that were there wrestling too, and he goes, "Did you piss him off?" I said, "No, I don't think I did." That's how it works, So, and then he started throwing cases of empty. It was a place called Kitties, and that's where we would film our TV for Southern Championship. It was an old honky tonk down in Marietta, Georgia. So there was a bunch of empty cases of Budweiser long neck beers there. He started throwing cases of beer in the ring after the match was over, and I was still in the ring selling for him. All of a sudden, the cases would come flying in, the bottles were breaking, glass was flying all around. I just rolled out. I was like, "Oh God, help me!" But that was one of the times that me and Doug Summers tagged against Tommy Rich and Frank. I think we did worked with them twice at a couple of house shows there, and they beat me all 3 times. So but it was a learning experience, and I had the pleasure of working with Bruiser Brody, and
Mm, mm,
the other monster heel I worked with, from Andre the Giant, King Kong Bundy, Ox Baker, Kamala. I mean, Abdul the Butcher. I mean, I got to work with some of the greatest heels in the world.
mhm,
Sheik. I mean, it was like a dream come true. You see these guys when you're growing up on Saturday, right after the cartoons when wrestling would come on and say, wow, I get to work with this guy tonight. Adrian Street, another guy I had the pleasure of working with.
mhm.
Legends, in our business. It was like, wow, I'm just a young guy and I'm getting to work with this guy and I'm getting to work with that guy. And it's an honor. I looked at it as an honor to put somebody like that over. And even some of the guys, when they would put me over, like King Kong Bundy, put me over in Staten Island on a Tommy D show. And there was about 1,500 people there, and everybody thought Bundy was going to beat me. And, we switched it up and, I pinned him and it made me look, it made me that much stronger, and he passed the, like the torch on to me a little bit with this independent promotion up here. And me and Mick Foley, we would have great matches together up and down the East Coast. And, before the people thought of hardcore, me and Mick were doing hardcore, before EC,
Mm,
any of that stuff, we were
mhm.
leading every night, cage matches with Tommy D or with the UWF and stuff. So it was a great time to be in wrestling back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, yeah. I think you characterized it best as the golden era. I had to ask you though about a brief run that you had with Stampede Wrestling, a major icon promotion here up here in Canada. How did you get booked there? And first question is, did you talk to Stu?
Yeah, I talked to you big bastard. Yeah. So,
Exactly.
I actually got to see Stu because I wrestled in the what was it, the cattle, what was it, the Stampede, the Cattle Dome up there, which was
Saddle Dome.
about 6 months before I went up to Stampede for Stu and the Hearts. But Owen got me booked up there. I went up there, and I guess Don Morocco was there. I think it was they brought me, Morocco, and I think Randy Dogs up there, to shake it up a little bit. And then Brian Pillman was coming back about 3 weeks after I got there. Me and Pillman were supposed to do a program, and I got to work with Benoit. I wrestled him in Edmonton, his hometown, for his Commonwealth Heavyweight Championship. We had a great match. We went about 30 minutes out there, and we tore the house down up there. And that was the only time I got to work with Chris. But I was a lot bigger than Chris at the time, and Chris was, built up, pretty good. He was doing the Pegasus Kid, going back and forth to Japan and stuff at the time. And then the Bulldogs came back in, I guess, Dynamite and Tommy, and they started working up there. But it was just too cold for me. I'm a good old Florida boy, and it was like 20, 30 below zero up there in Calgary. First day there, I was a big tan guy from Jacksonville, Florida, coming up to Calgary, and I didn't have any winter clothes or jackets or thermal underwear or wool socks or boots or nothing. And I froze, and the first paycheck I got, I went and bought, I went and bought a sweater, some thermal underwear. I got 2 pairs of thermal underwears. I got socks. I mean, all this winter stuff. All the money I made up there, I had to spend on clothes and lodging. They had me at the York Hotel. That's where all the boys would stay up there. And there was a little strip club in the basement. And I'm up there and I'm freezing. And all the guys, all they want to do is go wrestle and then go back to the strip club and drink and hang out. And I wasn't a big drinker or partier at the time. I never done drugs in my life. So, I'd go back to my room, hang out there, watch some TV. And, it was very bleak days for me up there. I stayed about 6 weeks in Calgary, and the buses were breaking down and the vans, and then they put us on a Trailways bus to come back. One time the bus, it was so cold that it froze up and we couldn't move, and it got stuck in a snowbank. And I'm like, this isn't me. So I gave my notice and left. And the pay wasn't right. They promised me X amount of dollars, and they weren't making the money, so they couldn't pay the money. That's what they told me. So I said, okay. The wise men, breaking me into business told me, if you're not getting paid, you're not going to work. So he goes, you don't. I said, yeah, I got you. So I got to, work in Calgary a little bit for 6 weeks, and another territory. But that's the kind of like the end of the territories. That the writing was on the wall. After Vince took over, and you couldn't go up to Atlanta, work for Southern or Peach State, or some of these independent promotions. They would stay relevant, and they had their own little TV shows and stuff, local TVs and stuff, and they draw and they make a little bit of money. And when I came off of WWF TV, I got booked a lot. And then I started going to Japan back and forth. Stan Hansen got me booked in Japan with him for All Japan Pro Wrestling. And I got to go in 1991. Me and Johnny Ace tagged over there in the World Tag League Championships, and got to wrestle against Andre and Baba and Stan and Dan Spivey and Terry Gordy and Steve Williams. There was some of the best tag teams ever over there.
Mm-hmm.
Got to, travel to that territory, and then UWF when they came around. So I got to see the world and, do a lot of cool things.
Which we'll touch on some more in a bit, but we've got some really historically savvy and smart fans on this channel, and one of them sent me a question talking about your brief Stampede tag team with Coburg, Ontario's own Goldie Rogers, a real character and a beloved figure amongst wrestling folks of the era. What was your experience with Goldie? How did you get put together with him?
I think it was a joke. I mean, they just stuck together because Gordy was a little guy and he was a veteran, older guy. And they put me with him, I guess, to carry the team or something. But, Gordy was a funny guy. I mean, I think I worked with him twice, in tag matches and stuff. But he was a funny guy. I think we worked a house show together against the Power Twins or something like that. And that's where I actually met the Power Twins, Larry and David Sontag. And then when I moved to New York, they were living out here in Long Island. So I got to chum around with them. And they actually got me my first bouncing jobs in New York City. I was working with them at a club called Roxy. And then we worked a lot at a place called T-Birds on Bell Boulevard in Queens, and Avanti's in Queens. So I'm still very good friends with the Power Twins and stuff. They're both living in Las Vegas now. But, we had a lot of good times together. But Goldie Rogers, he was a funny guy. He would say stuff and the crowd would chant. And I mean, I don't know, almost like Daniel Bryan, with the yeses, Goldie would say something. I forgot what his catchphrase was, but he had the crowd going a lot,
Yeah, he said Jack a lot. Sort of a strange pairing because he was small and you were very big, but who knows? It seemed to be received quite well by the crowd from what I've read.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be better than what it was when I went to Calgary because they promised me a lot of stuff up there. And I think, when they changed the booker up there, I don't know, I think one of the Bruce Hart or somebody started doing the booking and stuff. And, they knew I wasn't happy with the money and all that stuff. So they started, not really using me to the best of their abilities there. And I saw the writing on the wall. So whenever you're not getting treated right or used right, you look to go elsewhere. And I always took responsibility for my bookings and everything else. And people that treated me good, I treated them good. But if they weren't going to do anything with me or play with the money that they were promised, your guarantee, then that's when you go somewhere else. And, I thanked them for the opportunity to work for them. I was always professional and I gave them a notice. And, I said, look, I'm going to give you a week's notice because I don't have much money to get home on. I got enough to stay for another week. I said, I'll finish out the week for you guys, but I'm out of here.
Many had that experience around that era. Leo is asking, and you just listed 5 or 6 of the toughest guys of all time, but he's asking who the toughest wrestler was that you had to wrestle and why. Would it be Stan?
Well, Stan was, Stan was like a machine. I mean, his conditioning and cardio were unbelievable for a man his size. I mean, he could go an hour at a time. I mean, and he was nonstop. And Stan was one of the toughest guys I've been in the ring with. Brody, for sure, was one of the toughest. Abdullah was pretty tough because the nature of his matches, was bump, and sell for him, and he'd give you a little bit of a comeback, but then he cuts you off and, you're back to again. So, it was like those guys were really good. Who else was a tough guy? Back when I was in Calgary, Steve Blackman was actually there.
Yeah.
starting out. So he was, learning his craft, but he stayed to himself a lot. I got along good with all those guys up there. Biff Wellington, Blackman, um, Benoit was there. Pillman came back. Bruce Hart was there in and out. Bulldogs. I mean, I knew the Bulldogs from Vince, so I mean, I got along good with them, and I was always watching out for their ribs and stuff like that because they were nonstop, 24-hour-a-day ribbers. So you never know what you were coming into on the locker room, or if your Halliburton was going to get picked and your clothes would have been cut, and you go out to the ring and your pants fall off or something. So or they put something in your food or in your drink and you pass out and they shave your eyebrows. I mean, I'm very lucky that that never happened to me with them because I was always on guard. I never did drugs, and then if I did drink a beer or two, I would always keep my thumb over the top of it so nobody could put anything in the bottle. So they smartened me up real quick to their antics.
Mm-hmm.
How they abused Terry Taylor and some other younger guys. Tom Nash, they abused him when he was in Calgary, the Bulldogs, and it was just it was just entertainment for those guys. They just love to make people miserable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking bad about the dead or nothing, but that's just how they were.
Mm-hmm. Were you in? Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I want to ask you about the UWF next, but were you up in New York when the whole Dynamite Jacques Rougeau thing happened?
I saw it happen myself. It was at a TV taping, and I gave Dynamite the shirt off my back so he could go to the hospital. He was bleeding so much. What happened was Rougeau and Pat Patterson were walking down the hallway, and Dynamite and Bad News Allen were walking down the hallway. And Bad News is, from up in Calgary, I guess, and lived up there. So they were friends, and, Dynamite was ribbing and fighting with Rougeau. And I guess I've heard that he sucker punched him or did something to him sometime before that, at one of the matches, or kind of abused him. So Rougeau, gave him a receipt that day. He was walking down and he had a cup of coffee in his hand and he had a roll of quarters in his hand and he let him have one, a good one, and knocked his teeth out and he was bleeding all over the place. And they called, they took the Bulldogs off TV that night and everything else. He went to the hospital and got his teeth, his mouth looked at or whatever. But there was a lot of heat there for a long time after that. But I saw it happen personally. I was just going down the hallway to the food place, and I was walking by myself, and I helped break it up. And they separated it real quick, and News separated it. And, Pat pushed Rougeau off, and they went into some room or whatever. Vince had a meeting with both the parties, and I guess he sent everybody home. But it was a big thing, and then they had to work a program together after that, that Vince made him shake and make up and whatever, I guess. But I think Dynamite in his heart knew that he was wrong and that he deserved what happened.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of guys, they liked what Rougeau did because Dynamite was a bully, and I'm just being honest. What I saw, he would bully a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's something to see in real time for sure. A lot of people said that Dynamite wasn't ever the same after that as well.
I don't think he was. I got to work his last match in Japan, and I guess it was Budokan Hall. Me and Johnny Ace wrestled the British Bulldogs over there. It was Johnny Smith and Dynamite Smith. And I put him over for his last match over there, and he appreciated that. And he thanked me, and he was always okay with me, because he knew I gave him the shirt off my back and everything else. And he kind of, I guess he respected me, I guess, as much as he could respect people.
Mm-hmm. So you started a run about 91 with the Universal Wrestling Federation. So many really interesting moments and matches out of that promotion. And when it debuted, there was a lot of fanfare that this was going to be a major player on the national stage. How did you get booked in to the UWF? And was that your understanding that this could be a big player?
What's the next big thing? John Arizzi, wrestling, he did one of the first big conventions up here in New York City. So I was on his convention with him, and he introduced me. He goes, Herb Abrams wants to meet you. He goes, Bruno Sammartino, and there was a lady, Georgianne Macropolis. She had this Wrestling Chatterbox newsletter. So Georgianne and Bruno Sammartino put me over to Herb Abrams. So there's a guy, he wrestled WWF. He knew who I was. So he goes, yeah, I'd like to use him up here in UWF. You know, I could do something with him. He's a big guy. And, you know, I said, all right. So I met Herb at the convention and we got to talking and he signed me up with him and stuff. So I started wrestling with Herb after that. And I was going back and forth to Japan still. And I got to go to Global Championship too and work for them, you know, when they did their tag team tournament, their first, you know, big tournament that they had. Me and Steve Ray went down there as Wet and Wild. And then Herb called him up and said that he couldn't use Wet and Wild, but we made up the name. And Herb never signed us to a contract. I don't know why, but we never had contracts with Herb. And he said we were under contract. That's what he told ESPN, and they were afraid of a lawsuit, so they didn't want to use us after that. You know, after we did a tag tournament down there, but Global wanted to keep me down there, but Herb kind of put a squash to that. But make a long story short, that's where I started working with Herb, and Herb got along great with all the guys because Herb would pay for everybody's food, and you know, it was like a big party when Herb was around. You know, he was a funny guy, little guy, always telling jokes, happy-go-lucky. But, you know, most of the stories were true. You know, he liked his cocaine and he liked his women, you know. So he was married at the time to a lady, Murray. She was an Asian woman and stuff. But after he got into wrestling, about a year after he started the UWF, they got divorced and stuff. And he actually flew me out to Hollywood, California with him for his divorce court dates out there because he was afraid that her family was going to fight with him and stuff. So the funny story, you're going to love this one. I'm out there at Santa Monica Courthouse with Herb, and little Gary Coleman's there from Different Strokes. So Herb was just a little bit taller than Gary Coleman, you know.
Wow.
And standing in line, going through the metal detector, they check everybody when you go in the courthouse. And Gary Coleman and Herb, they're talking and bullshit. And I looked down at Herb and Gary. I said, Herb, I didn't know you took me to small claims court, you know. And everybody in the line, even the guards and everybody, they were laughing at Herb, and you know, and it was a funny moment. But back then we didn't have cell phones or cameras, so I would have loved to take some pictures of all that stuff. But I stayed out in California for about 3 or 4 days with him and stuff, and he showed me a really good time out there. Took me to all the clubs and restaurants he goes to, and introduced me to a lot of cool people. And you know, he always treated me like family, Herb. You know, and I respected that for him. And I used to have him around my family a lot, and dinners at my house and barbecues. And when he moved to New York, I helped him move and find an apartment and stuff. So, you know, I had a very good relationship with Herb.
Were you, I guess, shocked at his the manner in which he passed from this world?
Well, he opened up an office. You ever hear of Blimpie Subs? Blimpie? They're
Yes.
like a big national chain, like a submarine, like what's that other Subway, you know, stuff like that. Well, Blimpie was pretty big at the time, and they had an office right next to Madison Square Garden at Penn Plaza over there. Like I think it was like 9 or 7 Penn Plaza, and they gave Herb like a suite over there, like 5 or 6 offices in it. So we opened up a UWF office in New York, and we were going to come back. Like this was about 94, 95, the year that he died, like a year before. And I was working in the office with him, myself, Captain Lou, Johnny Valiant, kid Eric Rosen. I got him a job in there helping out. And there was another lady in there, I forgot her name, but she was like the secretary. And we were doing like, he was trying to book some overseas tours, and he was trying to syndicate a lot of his tapes like to Israel and Germany. And we were getting up a couple, like Australia, I think was very interested. Because, you know, back then we had Paul Orndorff with us. I mean, he had Morocco. I mean, we had Bob Orton Jr., Cactus, myself, Colonel De Beers, Brian Blair. I mean, list goes on, and Ivan Koloff, Bob Backlund, when we did like Blackjack Brawl and Beach Brawl. He had Sid, Valentine, Honky. I mean, he had so many guys. And
Steve Williams.
Because he liked him. Everybody loved him, you know, and it was like, you know, he was his own worst enemy, Herb, you know, because he got a lot of money from Sports Channel America, and he had a good time slot on Sports Channel America. And we thought it was going to take off, but he trusted a lot of people that would just yesing him to death. You know, they would take his money and they wouldn't, you know, like book the arenas the correct way or get television time, like for the commercials or to promote the shows or radio spots and stuff. So he lost a lot of money that way too, trusting the wrong people.
You're uh, gimmick that was really pushed hard on UWF TV. The iconic neon
Surfer.
wetsuit, yeah, the whole surfboard, the whole deal there. How did you develop that persona, and what was the process like to bring that to life? Because prior to this, from what I saw, you were pretty much just a big badass type of character, and this was a kind of a departure in a way. Is that correct?
It was a departure because they wanted me to, like almost like start over, kind of, like come up with a gimmick or a new persona. They gave me like, like when WWF, like when the Red Rooster, Terry Taylor, he was well over in UWF and all the other territories he worked in. Then they gave him the Red Rooster gimmick, and he came out there with his hair all, slicked back, red, or the Gobbledygooker. They come up with different names for people, Brooklyn Brawler, and then Steve Lombardi became Brooklyn Brawler. Well, they try to do the same thing with me in the UWF, and I said, look, I want to try this gimmick. I've been working on it. I'm from Florida. I grew up at the beaches. I said, I want to do a surfer gimmick, like got to kick sand in everybody's face, a big bully type surfer and stuff like that. But it turned in they wanted me to baby face it, so I had to be the good guy, shaking hands, kissing babies, like with the girls and stuff. And they put a thing in the World Weekly News for me about wrestler terrorized by love crazed women fans and stuff. And it was like, it brought some heat to me because I was married, and my wife's friends and all our friends and family, they're calling up and saying, what's this, all these girls chasing your husband or what? They on the page, World Weekly News and the supermarket tabloids. And you
That's
know
tremendous.
it was just, like they didn't understand the wrestling business, how they're trying to put people over, trying to, make people believe, the smoke and mirrors of the business and stuff. But that's what we were trying with that. And I think it would have taken off, or even if I would have went to either WCW at the time or back to Vince, I think that could have been a great spot for me with that type of gimmick and that type of thing. Plus, when I was with the WWF, there was a DJ down in Florida. He had the name Sandy Beach trademarked, and he wrote a cease and desist letter to the WWF, and they told me I got to change my name. So instead of changing the Beach, I kept the last name Beach, and I just changed it to Sunny Beach. And I got it trademarked myself, and I own the name and the rights to all that stuff. So that kind of worked out for me there. Just changed
Mm-hmm.
letters in the middle and kept a couple, got rid of the A and the D, and away we went.
Mm-hmm. You touched on your team, really successful team with another great worker, Steve Ray and Wet and Wild. How did that pairing come about, and what made that partnership so popular? Because you think of attempts at a similar sort of vein. You think of the Dynamic Dudes in WCW with Shane and Ace, and it never got over, but you guys really did. What made that chemistry so special?
It was getting over, which was a good thing. And like we were both two of the bigger baby faces in the UWF at the time, because the girls liked us, the young kids liked us because they liked the surfing thing. And Steve Ray, he was a little bit off the wall and a little eccentric, and he would do crazy stuff, and he would just get out there and act wild, and that's why they called him Wild Thing. But back then, Steve had his own little like clothing line called Power Shack International. And it was like the Team Michael shirts and all that stuff, and all the boys were wearing them, and he'd give them out, and we'd wear them on TV. And he was doing pretty good with that, and the nutrition, the supplements and stuff. He's in Kansas City, and he had a little gym, Power Shack, and he was trying to, set that stuff up. But that could have worked really big too for him. I think for a couple of years, he did very well for himself. But then I don't know what he got into after that. But after the UWF, we kind of like fell, I started my business and my family, and Steve had his family. And, I forgot his wife's name, but she was a big fitness model, a bodybuilder, and I think she was on what's that, American Gladiators. Tanya Knight, I think her name was.
Mm-hmm.
He had two boys with her, but I don't know what happened. I think she passed away or something years ago. But make a long story short, we got back together for when they did that episode, Cocaine and Cowboys, for Dark Side of the Ring, her story. So they flew Steve to New York, and we did some of our scenes at my house here, and then in my office in Northport, so my security office. So, and then I went to the grave, the cemetery afterwards where Herb was, and showed the guys, where he was buried and everything else. So, I keep in touch with Herb's sister, Hildy, and I keep in touch with his first cousin, Steve Simon. We actually own racehorses together. So, I'm still very close with the Abrams family.
Your feud with Cactus Jack and Bob Orton Jr., managed by the coach
John Toll.
John Tolos. You had that awesome match at the first pay-per-view Beach Brawl, and you had many matches there. What memories do you have from that program or the pay-per-view itself? And you can talk about your if you don't mind, your also later work with Cactus, because you guys had quite a singles rivalry too.
We wrestled probably 60, 70 times together throughout the years. I mean, a lot of matches up and down the East Coast. I mean, with the UWF, with Tommy D, with a lot of independent promotions. So, I mean, we did it all together, a lot of high schools, colleges, the pay-per-views and stuff. It was always a night off when I would work with, Bob Orton. He was just such a awesome teacher and just a consummate veteran. Like he taught me so much in the ring, and stuff, that just, the psychology and when to do stuff and when not to do it, and bring the people up, bring them down, when to start your comeback and everything else. So Bob Orton, he doesn't get enough credit that he deserves. I mean, look at his son Randy, how great he is now, and he's third generation, with his father and Bob and grandfather, father, and now Randy. So working with Cactus too, it was like a night off. I mean, I used to love working with him. I mean, we were both, give and take as much as each other could give, and all the matches were different. They were all interesting, but we gave it all for the fans. We gave the fans their money's worth, and people would say, "Wow, that was a great match," or "That was real," And I heard people saying, "Wow, did you see him hit him with a chair? He put the garbage can over his head and he drop kicked him, and the garbage can conformed to Cactus's body," or and Cactus, one time we were fighting in a high school, and he rolled all the way down the bleachers, and took a big bump for me, and it was hilarious, But sometimes, it was just, it was just like magic, in the ring. We would feed off each other, and we knew what each other was thinking, and we would do it. He would backdrop me on the concrete floor, and then he would go up to the top rope and drop an elbow on me, and he probably took 10 years off his wrestling career doing stuff like that, and I kept telling him, "Jack, you're going to be crippled before you're 50 years old." And, I saw him probably about 2 months ago at a convention, and he was hobbling around. He lost a lot of weight though, thank God. And, I'm trying to lose a lot of weight myself. I'm pretty good shape now. I'm about 285 now, but I want to get down to about 250. But Cactus lost a lot of weight, and he's doing some comedy shows. I think he's got a comedy show here in somewhere out in Bohemia, Long Island, I think July 31st. So I was thinking about sneaking up on him and surprising him at that. Maybe disrupting the show a little bit.
Yeah, very, very memorable matches. There seems to be a lot of desire for, I don't think it was just the dark side of the ring, but the UWF, Herb Abrams UWF, a lot of fans, younger fans have heard about it, want to, check it out. And I had a fan send me a question asking, is it true that you own the tape library?
I did acquire the tape library. The guy, Al Burke, Dr. Feelgood, him and I think it was Gene Okerlund's son, sold the library to ESPN without our consent or permission. I could have hired a lawyer and went after him and everything, but what am I going to do? Use my good money after bad money, and wonder if I wouldn't have won a case or something. I'm going to spend all that money, and Steve Ray and a bunch of other wrestlers wanted to get together and do a class action suit against ESPN because our livelihood with using our
Likenesses.
without our permission, likeness, and without our permission or consent. So we could have probably definitely won a huge lawsuit, but there wasn't really too many lawyers that wanted to take on that big, responsibility. It's plus going after ESPN and Disney. They have lawyers on retainer that make more in 1 hour than most of us make all week. So, I did have the library. I could probably still use the name UWF if I want to. The Abrams family knows that I have everything in place if I want to use it, and they gave me their blessing. But I'm going to be 62 years old this year, and wrestling is the farthest thing from my mind now. It was great. It was my past. I loved my past. I could go back to it. I could reflect on it, but you got to live in the present. I got grandchildren now. I got 4 beautiful grandchildren. I've been married for 36 years, still married.
Wow.
So, I mean, that doesn't happen a lot in the wrestling business,
Mm-mm.
so I'm very happy with where I'm at in my life. So I didn't want to get mixed up with any of that stuff, but I could definitely, if I wanted to, use everything that was with the UWF.
Yeah, speaking of which, you were the final Sports Channel television champion. That belt is a really nice looking belt too. What did that mean to you to be the final champion when
Well,
the company wound down?
at the time, I didn't know I was going to be the final champion. So,
Mm-hmm.
I still have the belt, and I still have one half of the tag team belts with me. I don't know where the other one went to, but we were going to go on an overseas tour. Me and Steve Ray were going to be the the tag team champions over there when we were starting back up, and it never came to fruition, I guess. Um, but the good thing is there's so much more history than a lot of people know. And there's still more stories to be told about Herb Abrams and the UWF and a lot of the good that he did. People don't know that he used to go to children's hospitals or go to all these like charity events and donate money. He would bring the wrestlers there to sign autographs, give out pictures and stuff. There was a lot more behind the man than what you heard about on all these like, you know, different social media platforms about how he, ran with hookers and all he did was party and did cocaine and everything. Yeah, what he does in his own private business is his own. I never did drugs with the guy. I never did any drugs. I never, got drunk with him and stuff or anything like that. And I never partied with hookers with him because I was a married man and he didn't, bring me into that part of his life. What he did on his own time is his own time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like they're talking about Hulk Hogan with the racial statements and stuff. He said that in the privacy with his family members, and it got taped and leaked and everything else. And it made him look terrible, and he lost probably millions of dollars because of that. And what you do in your private life should be private. I know we're all public figures and stuff once we start wrestling, and people come up to you when you're in restaurants or out in the street or at airports and want your autograph or want to take pictures with you. And I love my fans, and I always accommodate everybody, but you got to have private time too. And sometimes when the fans are too pushy, and they'll jump in front of your car, or could cause an accident or something, that's when your safety comes first and foremost, and that's what we try to do. I mean, I've been around some wrestlers where they were just healing all the time on people. They were living their gimmick. I was at when I was with the WWF, George Steele was with his wife and his daughter at a restaurant. Some fan came up to him and he yelled at him, and the fan scoured away, like he was scared to death of him. He goes, "Can't you see I'm with my family eating dinner? Get away from me," and he just, you can only take so much from people. The guy was
Mm-hmm.
staring at him the whole time. And I've been in the gyms where people are, just staring at you or looking at you like Brock Lesnar, some of these other guys, people, they're like, make you feel uncomfortable. They'll come up to you, these fans, and they'll like stare at you, wait around for you. And, nowadays with all these stalkers and freaks out there, you never know what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, 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 very good point. You touched on earlier briefly the global federation out of Dallas, and just wanted to get your recollection of the whole deal that global was going to be, the next world class, bigger than world class, and there was this mysterious investor that had all kinds of money. Were you brought in through Joe Pedicino, and do
Was
you have any recollection of that story?
I never got to meet the money guys. I was only out there for a couple of tapings and stuff until, Herb kind of squashed that for us. But they treated me very well out there. And I thought they were going to be really big with Del Wilkes out there, when he was doing the Patriot gimmick, and Mark Bagwell, the handsome stranger, and they had the Young Bloods, and the Royal Family was out there. I mean, they had 1, 2, 3 Kid, Lightning Kid. So they had some awesome talent out there. I mean, really good. Scott Putski, I think, was out there. Um, there was so many different guys in and out of there. And I mean, that was just, I think Booker T and his brother were out there, Harlem Heat. And, it was just, it
Harry
could,
Horowitz.
Yeah, Barry was out there. It could have been huge, really huge. And we were at the Sportatorium, and that's, like sacred ground out there, Von Erich country. So we were filming out there, and it was just, I saw huge potential, especially with Pedicino out there calling the shots and doing a lot out there. And I mean, they had a very big opportunity to take over. I mean, I thought they would have been a lot bigger than like AWA, and they had a lot of good time slots with their TV, and it was national, coverage and stuff. So I was just waiting for them to just blow the roof off the place, but it never really happened.
Mm. Yeah, too bad. Matthew's asking about. We've talked a little bit about Japan, but a lot of fans have sent in questions, and now we've got a couple live viewers asking about. This must be a difficult one, but memories of your tours in Japan, and you touched on, man, you wrestled a who's who out there of so many legends. Can you boil it down to, I guess, some highlights?
Well, I think the best match I wrestled in Japan was when me and Johnny Ace wrestled Masawa and Kawada in the tag league the first time I was over there. I think it was December of '91. And both these guys are like top of the All Japan Pro Wrestling, Triple Crown winners, all Asian tag team champions and stuff. And I never worked with them before. And we went about 30 minutes, me and Johnny, with them, and we had a 5-star match with them. And they let me work a lot. And, it wasn't like here, where, they, wouldn't let you do too much, but they'd let me do everything. I power slammed them. I drop kicked them, a missile drop kick off the top rope. You name it. I got to work. I mean, good with them. And they were putting me over. I got put over more in Japan than I did more over here, believe it or not. I worked a lot of singles matches there where I wrestled a lot of the younger guys over there. I got to wrestle Andre and Baba with Johnny. And then the second tour I went, me and Del Wilkes were a tag team over there, me and the Patriot. And I got to work Stan and Johnny for the Bruiser Brody Memorial Cup over there. So, I mean, we had some really great matches over there. I mean, even working with the Bulldogs for Dynamite's final match, I mean, that was an honor to work too. So, I mean, all my matches in Japan, I loved every single match. I mean, I respected the culture. That's one of my favorite places to ever wrestle. Korakuen Hall over there, Budokan Hall, Tokyo Dome. There were so many just huge, awesome places. And, I got to work some of the best talent in the world, for the tag league. And then when I went back for the summer action series in '92. So, I mean, I love Japan, but again, in the wrestling business, you got to take care of your business. And, like Johnny Ace was over there, and, maybe he thought maybe I was a threat to his spot on the card or something. So I kind of got dismissed from All Japan, for him to protect his spot over there. Because I was, getting over pretty good over there. And I guess, once you get over there, everybody's worried about their position or their spot on the roster. So.
Yeah, that's sorry, go ahead.
There was some, like a little resentment that I was over there and doing the beach gimmick. And, it was a completely different gimmick than what Johnny had, but I guess he felt a little threatened by my presence there or my ability there. From what I heard. I don't know for a fact, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know whether we'll be hearing much from Johnny Ace in the near future or the far future, given some of the developments in his situation. So,
well, you know what they say, karma. Karma, when it comes around, it comes to bite you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But you make a really interesting point there. You were in, we keep saying this, but the golden era, a lot of fans regard as the best era of pro wrestling, and it was highly competitive, unpredictable. Just before guaranteed contracts, all that stuff. How do you contrast that with today's environment that has human resources? Everybody's got a guaranteed contract. The schedule is, and I'm talking the major organizations. The schedule isn't what it used to be. What are your thoughts just on that business end of modern wrestling, so to speak?
Well, modern wrestling, everybody does have, contracts, their schedule. We used to wrestle like 28 days a month out of 30 days in a month. We were wrestling 28 days. Like we'd have 2 weeks on, 3 days off, 3 weeks on, 2 days off. You just get to go home. Like I lived in Jacksonville, Florida when I was with the WWF. So I would fly home, pay all my bills, do my laundry, and then get ready to go back out on the road the next day. And I was living out of a suitcase for, almost 2 years straight. Some guys, did it their whole life, 10, 15 years straight. So my hat's off to the big time veterans, from the 80s and 90s that did that. The guys were wrestling 300 days a year sometimes, maybe 330 days a year. And, you don't have time for your body to recover. You're working through a lot of injuries. That's why a lot of these guys got hooked on pain pills and alcohol and drugs. And that's why there was a lot of divorces and, suicides and stuff like that, car accidents, because the guys weren't sleeping or they fall asleep driving or, I look at some of the cards that I was on, the wrestling shows back in the 80s, and over half the card is gone. Everybody's dead now. And, it's just so sad, seeing this, and guys that were great guys, family men that really took care of themselves are gone, and I'm like, I say a prayer every night that I'm still here, that I didn't get caught up in the vortex of all that stuff, or I didn't fall into drugs or alcohol or abusing my body with steroids or anything like that. So, I mean, that, and with the guaranteed contracts and stuff, I mean, we were on a nightly per diem pretty much, it was whatever the house was, like if we had like, say you had 1,000 people, you probably make $300-400. Now, if you were on a Hulk Hogan show, you might make $5,000-6,000. Like on my spot, like when I wrestled the Garden, I think I made like $7,000 for a sellout at the Garden. And that was like maybe fifth match, me and Scott Casey. And then the next week I would be at a high school somewhere and I'd make $400,
Mm-hmm.
So, and it cost you, $100-150 for a rent a car. It cost you back then maybe $100 a night for a hotel room. And then you had to pay for all your food, and gas, your trans. So you have to pay for your transportation, you have to pay for your lodging, and you have to pay for your meals and food. And we didn't have any insurance. I had to pay for my own health insurance, like $1,000 a month back then. So, nowadays they have guaranteed contracts. They have health insurance, most people, and they don't work the schedule we work. They might do their TV tapings and 1 or 2 house shows a week, maybe. So they're probably working maybe 10 times a month instead of 30 times or 28 times. So they're at home with their families a little bit more. They're probably putting a lot more money in their pocket. Plus, they probably have better merchandise deals than we ever had.
Do you watch the current product in terms of the TV shows? A lot of fans that are lapsed cite that it's just not the same. There's no psychology, and it's a lot of, especially with one of the two big twos, there's a lot of acrobatics and all that sort of stuff. I don't want to sound like the old man who agrees with that, but I do. Just wonder what your take is on how it's almost a completely different business from a pro wrestling product to a TV product.
It is a different product right now. It's more merchandise driven a lot of times. A lot of times now, the acrobatics, you got to tell a story. What would a match, back then you had to have psychology. You used to be able to do your own interviews. You didn't have creative or people writing scripts for you. You used to go out there and do your own promos and interviews. You had one shot to do it. If you messed up, you messed up, but at least it was you talking and you telling, what you're going to do to your opponent or leading up to the big match. That's how you would sell tickets. That's how you would put seats in the arena. That's how you would, have a good house, and people, they'd want you to, clash with somebody. Like if me and Mick Foley were having a match, I'd be talking about Mick, oh, you cheated, you held my tights last time, this time, we're going to have a better referee, or, you rolled me up and you had your foot on the ropes, but this time, I'm coming for revenge or whatever, you got to say. But, now they don't let you do that. They have people that are on payroll that all they do is write up stuff, make up matches and write finishes and do all this stuff. And I would have never thought that was going to happen in the wrestling business, but sure enough, it did. But back then we used to tell stories and we used to all ride together. Now we don't. Now guys have their own buses that they travel in or their own little Back then, we used to all share a dressing room, a heel dressing room and a babyface dressing room. Now everybody's got their own individual dressing rooms and stuff. They're all superstars, or they all got the big head now. A lot of these guys. I was at a wrestling autograph signing one time, and there was a couple new kids from AEW there. One of them was getting a push, and me and Ray Lloyd Glacier were there at this wrestling. What was it? Pro Wrestling Universe over in Queens, New York. We were doing an appearance there. And this kid didn't even get up and shake our hands or do anything. You know, we come in, we say hello to everybody. We're waiting for this kid to say hello. He didn't say nothing. And me and Ray looked at each other and said, what a disrespectful little shit. You know, and I go, I'm not going to shake his hand and put him over. You know, so me and Ray just looked at him the whole time. And he signed a handful of autographs, but he thought who he was. And he was a small little guy, but he's getting a little push now with AEW. But I was like, wow. I said, if I would have went back and told the boys about that, they would have chewed him up in the next match, or they would have waited for him in the dressing room and beat the shit out of him. So you want to treat everybody with disrespect, or you don't want to shake a veteran's hand? You know, they'd smack him right across his face. I've seen that happen in the old days.
Yeah, definitely an entirely different milieu in the locker room. Got time for one more fan question who sent it to me, wanting to know about you're working the legendary Roddy Piper on Wrestling Challenge in '92. That must have been an experience for you.
That was an honor. I mean, it was a night off with Roddy. I mean, he was a great guy. Legend in the wrestling business, and his death, you know, caught everybody by surprise too. You know, it came out of nowhere. You know, it just a sad day. But Roddy Piper was one of the best heels ever in the sport of professional wrestling. The psychology. He wasn't the biggest guy, but he had the biggest heart and the most fire and fight. And he would fight anybody. I mean, he was a tough guy, legit. I mean, he grew up on the streets. He had a hard life coming up and stuff. And we talk about that, but he was just a pleasure to be around. His knowledge of the wrestling business and psychology was just, you could just talk to him for hours and pick his brain. Another guy, Kevin Sullivan, too. Another good friend of mine that booked me down in Florida, championship wrestling from Florida. And he great mind, too. But Piper was a great guy, night off to work with. I mean, just a phenomenal athlete and a great guy.
I guess this is a difficult two-part question in terms of the first part, which is, you know, you had a really excellent career, did a lot of things. You basically done it all. If you had to delineate down to what you are most proud of, in ring, out ring, whatever, what would that be? And second of all, what advice would you give to those youngsters looking to break into the business today?
Well, I'll start with breaking into business today first. Go to a good school. Dustin Rhodes has a great school over in Texas. Booker T's got a good school. Go to an established wrestling training school or wrestling camp to learn the business. Johnny Rods has got a school in Brooklyn still. He doesn't really get in there and train too much himself, but he's got understudies that go in there and train the guys the right way. So anywhere you could go learn and put your time in, like anything else, you got to practice. You got to go to the gym. You got to be in shape. You got to, you know, have stamina. It's not for the weak-hearted, or, you know, you got to really be dedicated to the sport, live, breathe wrestling, and watch old tapes. I used to watch old tapes of people. I used to, you know, eat right, go to the gym 5-6 times a week, run. I would run miles and miles just to get my endurance and stamina, but go to a good trainer and learn the business the right way, and always listen. You know, go with an open mind, and don't be afraid to try stuff, moves, and you know, pick people's brain. Talk to the old timers if they'll talk to you, and, you know, get some you know, tips from them too. And the more you put into something is what you're going to get out of it. You know, that's my advice to the younger people. Probably my best two memories of wrestling, well, I probably have three. Doing No Holds Barred was one of my highlights of my career, where I got to, you know, work with Hulk and, you know, the rest of the guys with the movie. And, you know, that'll be forever, you know, etched in, you know, the wrestling fans' memories and mine and my family's. Working Madison Square Garden the first time and 1988 was another one. Wrestling in Japan was another great memory. The whole tour, the first time I was there, was just a awesome experience. Going to Germany and Poland for some overseas tours. And I mean, I got to go all over the world. I went Pakistan, India, South America, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. I mean, I've been all over the place, and I wouldn't have had the opportunities if it wasn't for the wrestling business. So I thank the wrestling business. I thank the fans. I thank the promoters for having me and trusting me. And the other stuff is like some of the charitable things that I've done. I was a member of the Community Mayors of New York. Freddie Blassie got me involved with that, and I was a mayor, and got to go to a lot of children's hospitals, Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute, Long Island Children's Foundation. I was heavily involved with. I was vice president of that. It's giving back to the community. Let your celebrity, always pay it forward and always try to give back, and live a good, clean life. You don't need drugs. Always reach for the stars, and always, do your best to your ability.
Well, I extremely appreciate your time tonight, Mr. Beach. Where can the fans find you on social media? And do you have any events or anything else that you'd like to plug at this time?
Well, I have a couple of autograph shows coming up. I have one in September in Queens at the Elks Club. I'm not sure of the date. I think it's September 9th, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's from like 11 a.m. to like 2 p.m. at the Elks Club at Queens, New York. That's, I think, my next autograph show. And then I think I might be doing a big event out here at, I think it's in November at Suffolk Community College. I don't know the date for that one, but you guys could usually find me at Rick Allen on Facebook, or Sunny Beach, Facebook.com, I guess. So those are the two. Sunny Beach USA is one of my email addresses and stuff. So .com.
Well, once again, thank you very much for your time. Fascinating career that you've had, and your anecdotes are very much appreciated. And we'll keep in touch with what you have going on and bring that back.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Good luck with you, and see you guys down the road.
Well, fans, that's it for this edition of the GP Productions podcast. Make sure you like this video if you did, and subscribe as we're continuing to grow as a channel. Till next time, Jack Kilby for Mr. Sunny Beach. Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching this video. Please give it a like if you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow us on all social media platforms at Cheap Heat Productions. Don't forget to hit the notification button, and you won't miss any of our upcoming interviews